Hey, and welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. We appreciate you being here as we are presented and brought to you by FanDuel. We're going to be going over around the Big Ten today, going through with a few guests from Big Ten podcasts here in the Big Ten, asking questions and 3 questions, 3 guests in 30 minutes. But the surprise is we have 4 guests today from 3 different podcasts. It's going to be a good time. Well, we're going to get right into it. Please do like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. If you're listening on podcast, 5-star rating review helps us out as we are talking Big Ten every single day here on the Big Ten Huddle and fighting that SEC football bias battle as well as everybody likes to fight and be sure that we knock them down a few pegs because as USC did last year, they went 2-0 against them and they were really helping out the cause last year. So we appreciate USC doing that for us because it's needed. But we'll get to our first question here, and this one is about the SEC. So I'm curious, there are some Big Ten fans that kind of put it out there like, hey, we don't really care about the SEC as much. We don't really care about it. It seems like kind of a new thing, a new day and age for college football. Do you guys consider the SEC a conference rival? Do you guys have, hard feelings toward the SEC? Or are you guys just kind of like, it is what it is? Like, I don't get this whole conference rivalry stuff. B. Jones, man, let us know. How are you guys feeling about the SEC this season?
I mean, you can blame the SEC for what happened to us about 20 years ago. And you see their rise came around that time. So we won't have to go into all the conspiracies about that. But yeah, we can't stand the SEC. Absolutely can't stand them. They're overrated year in, year out. Bowl season proves it. We always see them talk a lot of noise in the bowl season, but then they lose all their games to the Big Ten. And yeah, man, we're over it. We're over all the biases, man. We just want to let the play do the talking. Stop trying to prop your teams up. Just do it on the field.
It's always great to play Wofford, in week 11. That's always it's so much fun when you get those games. I've always considered the SEC's kind of like the Greek system. It's like, you see the sorority rush videos, Alabama and Tennessee, and there's obvious knockouts, right front and center in the camera. But if you look closely, there's some 4s and 5s hiding in the back, and their boyfriends, they go home and they say, yeah, they're dating a tri-pie or whatever, but it's really there's better looking girls at Mississippi Gulf Coast. So the SEC is always top heavy and the bottom dweller. I mean, this year, Mississippi State, Florida, teams that have rested on their laurels for many, many years now are still carrying the banner of the SEC. But I think the SEC is finally seeing the parity in the NIL era that the rest of the conferences have always dealt with. Because while they may have blown the whistle on some of those Pac-12 teams to try to get them in trouble, we all know that they've had the best bagmen in the world. And so now that everyone has bagmen and it's all out in the open, and now they're paying taxes on it, it's an interesting dichotomy with the SEC and the Big Ten, because the Big Ten's always been the traditional power, birthplace of college football is in the Big Ten with Rutgers, and you have all of these traditional powers of Ohio State, Michigan, and now adding USC in the Pac-12 schools, Pac-10, Pac-12 schools. The SEC, I think, realizes they're not what they used to be, and they're all just banding together trying to toot that horn. So the college football playoff has proven the last couple of years that the Big Ten is not just a player, but they're the leader right now. And so while the team that I support is still kind of in the middle tier of the Big Ten, I would still consider the middle tier of the Big Ten to outperform the middle to lower tier of the SEC, despite what the idiots at Barstool say.
Well, and Nick Saban too, right? He's the one coming out here with like it's the deepest conference and everything else. I mean,
he's got to protect his bronze. He's got to protect his statue, right? I mean, he's 2/3 of his college coaching career was in the SEC. The other third was at Michigan State. So he at least knows both conferences, but really he's protecting his legacy by propping up the SEC.
I'll say this, though. I hate the SEC as much as anyone, and I'm a Big Ten homer. I grew up in Madison. I went to Iowa. I work for the university. But that said, it's getting to the point where it's going to be the SEC and Big Ten and everybody else. And so I guess it's going to have to be a rivalry we kind of learn to love, because, if we think the Big Ten should get 3 or 4 teams into the college football playoff every year. We have the same argument that the SEC makes. And so, unfortunately, I think that we're going to have to sort of buddy up with them once in a while to kind of bully everybody else to get things the way that we would like to see it. And, for fans of teams like Iowa, we want to have that 3-4 deep Big Ten run in that, because that gives us an opportunity to get in there with some of the blue bloods as well. So as much as I agree that, their mid-tier and bottom is no better, the big money, the big names, all of that, and the power that comes with it it just matters more now for everybody, pun intended, because you're going to see people have to throw their weight around if they're going to try to, make their conference stand out. And so, like it or not, we're sort of hitched to their wagon.
Well, they have to start playing a 9-game schedule. That's the biggest factor. I mean, they're only playing an 8-game conference schedule. In Penn State, Vince, I'm curious to hear your opinion on this, because that's one of the biggest reasons why Penn State left the independent in 1993 was because they realized the landscape was changing. In order to be relevant, they needed to hitch their wagon to a conference.
Yes, sir. And, with the SEC, I kind of agree with all you all. I think it's very overrated. If you look at some of the rankings, there's no way that many teams in the SEC are as good as, the rest of these conferences combined. They have about the same amount of teams in the rankings. And I guess from my perspective with the bowl games, we always seem to do really well against them in the bowl games. So, I'm tired of all the smack talk. We had it with basketball too, like the Big Ten ACC challenge. I'm ready. Let's make a Big Ten SEC challenge week 2. Everybody, like the top team in the Big Ten plays the top team in the SEC all the way down to number 16. And let's let the players decide week 2, just have an all out battle. And that way we can just end this conversation.
Man, I love the idea of a Big Ten SEC battle. I went through and did a hypothetical, which everybody knows the SEC loves their hypotheticals right now. I kind of did one of those with some power rating stuff and everything. And the top of the Big Ten really did dominate. I mean, 5 of the 6 teams at the top dominated, not just close wins, but they won 5, like I said, 5 of those 6. Some of the middle tier ones, I mean, the SEC did dominate in that, but a lot of those were closer than you would have thought. So this whole idea of the SEC is just far and away better, it's completely false. I think that a lot of it is trying to prop themselves up because of the rankings and everything else. And this whole idea of parity that we see in college football, yes, there is more parity, but the predominant thing right now is that Alabama and Georgia don't have first rounders on their 2-3 deep. And so the parity of college football is here because those first rounders and people have gone to, other schools, whether it be USC, sometimes in the SEC to Ole Miss or whatever else. And, some of the ACC teams are getting them as well. So while there is more parity, it's not because the SEC has, 5 national title contenders now. It's because they may only have 1 and everybody else has kind of gotten up to that, not necessarily national championship contender, but playoff contender status.
Well, and I think that we're going to see this a little bit with the 12-team playoff this year. I think you're going to see 3 SEC teams, 3 or 4 Big Ten teams in the playoffs. So we're going to get to see some of those head-to-head matchups in crunch time. When no one's sitting their players, because that's what they always say with the bowl rankings. It's like, we had guys skip the bowl game because they're prepping for the draft. Well, no one's missing the playoff games. So we're going to start to see some real equality when it comes to these teams playing. And not, Alabama and Wisconsin played each other this year, but that game was scheduled 9 years ago. So these non-conference games, they take so long, have such a long tail in the scheduling that it's hard to get these matchups early in the season. So that's why the playoff expansion is going to help this argument and this discussion along quite a bit.
Totally. And that's actually where I'm going to go with my next question here. And Joel, we'll start with you on this because I think, you've got a team that's really vying for it at this point. It's how many teams can the Big Ten get into the playoffs? Now, we were thinking at the beginning, okay, 4 teams are going to make it. It looks like it's likely Ohio State, Penn State, Vince, and Oregon are going to be there. However, things have looked a little different with Penn State. things have been very, very favorable for Indiana this season. They've been favorable for Iowa too, but more favorable for Indiana with how they performed and the big win they got over Oregon. I see some people even questioning now. Oregon has a really tough road to end the season. USC, Washington, Iowa, all there. That Oregon's not a for sure lock like we thought either, because they're going to have to face some tough opponents, and they could possibly be out with 3 losses if they go out there and lose to a couple teams. So, Joel, with all of this in mind, I mean, the Big Ten does have a number of teams that are still kind of close. I think USC has the best odds outside of the 3 of Ohio State, Indiana, and Oregon right now. But I would say Iowa and Washington are up there as well. How many teams do you think the Big Ten will get into the playoffs this year, and what teams do you think those are?
I think it's going to be 3, but I think the path to 4 really depends on what Georgia Tech does. If Georgia Tech stays the course here and stays on their winning ways, and they beat Georgia that last game of the season, then that could really alter the landscape, and perhaps a 4th Big Ten team sneaks in. So I think Georgia Tech is a huge, huge factor in how this all shakes down from the 12-team playoff. I know that there's like, I have to go back and look at it with all the, like with Memphis and some of these, the group of 4 teams, are they guaranteed one if they win the conference? That's the stuff I'm trying to remember and figure out. But in regards to the Big Ten, I think that really, if Iowa beats Oregon at home on November 8th, then the team who wins that USC Iowa game the following week, I think is the catbird seat for the number 3 spot. Because I think if Oregon loses to Iowa, they still have to play USC and Washington, which are rivalry games from back in the Pac-10 days, Pac-12 days. And so those are always toss-ups when you get the rivalry aspect to it. So if Iowa is able to beat Oregon, which I saw that the early line came out that Iowa is a 6.5-point underdog at home, if Iowa is able to win that game, then I think that they are in the catbird seat for that number 6 spot. But they would have to win out to do so. And then Michigan, I think, also has a favorable run to this too, because if they beat Ohio State like they have the last 4 years, then all of a sudden that just creates a whole domino effect. And if Georgia Tech runs the table, SEC only gets 2 teams now, with Georgia perhaps losing that game, and then you'll have the SEC championship game. There's a path for the Big Ten to get 4, and I think those last 2 teams in is going to be the winner of the three-headed monster of Oregon, USC, and Iowa. Whoever wins the 2 games against those opponents. So that's going to who's get the 3rd spot, and then Michigan could slide into that 4th spot with a win over Ohio State. But I really think I honestly think it's Iowa who's going to do this, because they're going to beat Oregon. If they beat Oregon, then they'll have to go out to the West Coast, which Tori and I always disagree on how well Iowa will play on the West Coast, because it doesn't always go well when we go west. But I think that pivotal game is going to be the USC Iowa game if Iowa beats Oregon on November 8th.
Well, I also think there's going to be 3 teams, and I think your breakdown is right, Joel. And B. Jones is going to like my answer, because I think I am more concerned about Iowa going to USC and winning than I am beating Oregon at home, especially if we get an early game. If it's an 11 a.m. game, the Ducks are going to be up at 9 a.m. there by their body clocks and kicking off in front of 70,000 absolutely insane drunk yahoos right on the field. I know Autzen gets a lot of flowers, but they haven't experienced Kinnick when Iowa is actually ready to do some damage. So Joel gets mad at me, but until I see Iowa actually go out to the West Coast and play a team in their home stadium and not get the crap kicked out of them. I mean, UCLA physically dominated last year, and that should have never happened. The last time USC and Iowa played, it was in the Holiday Bowl, was out west, but USC had guys out. Iowa immediately knocked out their quarterback. That game was an exhibition. That doesn't count to me. So I need to see it. So I would actually probably give USC the inside track. I don't know that if Oregon has losses to Indiana and Iowa, their road's going to be tough too, and especially if USC beats them. So yeah, I'm kind of feeling right now like Ohio State, Indiana, and USC would probably be my pick today if I was going to go with the 3 that are going to get in.
Yeah, from my perspective, I think it could be scary. I do think the most likely outcome is 3 teams. However, I wouldn't be shocked if it did end up being 2, Ohio State and Indiana. The reason for that, because I think Oregon at Iowa, Iowa at USC, USC at Oregon, I think all 3 of those road games are going to be extremely difficult for all those opponents. However, a team I think that could sneak into the playoffs for the Big Ten is Washington. I think their schedule is very favorable heading forward, and then they get Oregon at home. And Oregon has tough games at Iowa. They have to deal with USC at home. They've traveled cross country to Penn State, winning in double overtime in the whiteout. So I think the most likely outcome would be Ohio State, Indiana, and I think I'm going to go dark horse here with Washington at 10-2.
One thing on Washington. One thing on Washington, though, and I said this on our podcast last week, Jedd Fisch is in play at Florida. I know he's not someone that the whole world is talking about right now, but I actually have some sources in Gainesville, and Jedd Fisch is very much in play. That's his alma mater, and I think by the time the end of this season is going to be rolling around, that's the name that's actually going to be out there as the likely candidate. So we'll see if that affects how Washington finishes their season, with the potential that those guys are looking to where their next destination might be.
That could very well be true. He does have some smoke out there. Before we get into that too much, I do want to hear what B. Jones has to say about this playoff, though, because B. Jones, you're at like the epicenter of all this, man, with USC and everything. So I mean, there's a lot of talk about you, but that schedule is not easy to finish out the year. What's your thoughts?
Well, I would have to say, man, it's just the same thing we've been seeing all season. If we can be consistent, if we have that Iowa game at home we look like juggernauts. You know what I mean? But when we get on the road, it gets a little tricky, right? So it depends on, what do we see out of USC for the rest of the season. But like Vince said, Washington is definitely a team to watch. But Joel just brought up a good point. That's definitely something to keep our eye on, man. That's going to make things a little tricky too. But I could definitely see 3 teams as well. But I agree with Vince with Washington being the dark horse.
Yeah, it's huge. And these West Coast teams coming in, man, I love these West Coast teams coming in because it's just elevated the conference that much more. It's given us so many better games. And, I mean, the travel really has made it such a difficult thing. I do not envy the West Coast teams for how much you guys have to travel. But it really has made it so much more parity in the conference, especially traveling out to those places. Tori, I think you were going to say something on Jedd Fisch, and then we'll move on to our last question.
No, I defer to Joel on his little coaching source tree. I know nothing.
Oh, okay, all right.
And I actually,
was there somebody else? Did I miss out?
Also, just Alabama's got some issues going on right now that I've heard about. People aren't happy with Ryan Williams right now. He's had too many drops at the receiver position. So we'll see if Alabama starts to tumble a little bit. The chemistry is awry, and that is directly from one of their assistant coaches who I know pretty well. So I'm undefeated against Kalen DeBoer as an NAIA football coach. So that's my claim to fame. I am 2-0 against Kalen DeBoer in my coaching career. So that's my claim.
There we go. I love it. Well, hey, we'll get to the last question here, and just for reference, because I meant to mention it at the beginning, Michigan does have the best odds on FanDuel, plus 820 outside of the top 3 in the Big Ten, and then following that is USC has the best at plus 710. Michigan is second at plus 820, and then after that you have Iowa at plus 1400, and then Washington is at plus 1300. So.
Never tell me the odds, JR. Never tell me the odds.
Ohio State has to beat them eventually, right?
Right. So last question here, fellas, and Tori, we'll start with you on this one, then we'll go to Vince and get Vince's thoughts and just kind of go around the horn. What are the most underrated games or just maybe a singular game in the Big Ten that's going to end it out? We've been talking about USC and their games against Iowa and Oregon with their game against Washington and everything else. Like these are obviously games people are paying attention to. Are there any underrated games that you're looking at to end the season that people need to be paying attention to, whether it's for a coach or whether it's for playoff race, whatever it might be?
There is, and I think it's actually this coming week. Vince is going to love this, but that Penn State team has so much talent on it, and I thought the interim coach did a great job at the Iowa game. He had those guys ready to play after a week of insane distraction. They're going to get somebody, and Indiana's feeling themselves right now, and probably thinking they're pretty hot stuff. Everybody's talking about they're a shoe-in for the playoff. I say beware in Beaver Stadium, Hoosiers. That could get ugly for you. So I'm going to be really excited to watch that game. Obviously, probably doesn't have any impact on the Big Ten race or probably even the college football playoff race. I still think Indiana's in, even if they lose that game. But it would not shock me at all to see Penn State spring the upset there.
I would be shocked. I've been waiting so long for a big win. Even in the college football playoff last year, like you get SMU at home and then you play Boise State and then you play Notre Dame and you can't win the big one. We can't beat Ohio State off a pick 6 and we score 6 points the rest of the game. Like we've had so many games go our way. Even Oregon, we get 2 last-second touchdowns. We get the stop on the 2-point conversion in overtime, and then we just drop the ball. But the guy at the head of the helm, James Franklin, is no longer there. Terry Smith, like you said, did some really great things at Iowa. Starting quarterback Drew Aller is out for the year with injury. Ethan Kruckemeyer does a really solid job in Kinnick Stadium, which I think outside of Beaver Stadium is probably the most hostile environment, especially at night. Crazy things happen at Kinnick. So yes, Coach Smith has done a really nice job. The players were playing hard, and that game was a lot closer than I was expecting it to be.
We mentioned it, but I still don't think this game is going to get enough love outside the conference, and that's Oregon and Iowa. I know for us, it's like we know it's a big deal, but I don't feel like everyone outside of the conference is really going to give it its just due. But that game is very important, and I can see Iowa coming away with that one, to be honest, man, in my opinion.
Joel, finish us out here, man. I mean, that's we've been giving Iowa plenty of praise in this one, and it's been deserved.
Yeah, and I do that enough as it is. Everyone's probably tired of me talking about Iowa. So I kind of went through each weekend and picked one from each weekend. So I'll go fast here. The first one is this weekend on November 1st. I think it's a sneaky, tough game. USC has to go to Lincoln and play at Nebraska, and that is not an easy place to play. And there's a lot to play for both teams in this game. And you've got Raiola, who, as annoying as he is, and it's hard for me to say anything positive about Nebraska, but that's one that I don't think enough people are talking about. Everyone assumes USC should go in there and handle the Huskers based on how they've played. But as you said, B. Jones, the way that they are at home and the way they are on the road is completely different. Nebraska's the only team that's beaten Cincinnati this year, who is looking like a juggernaut. So Nebraska can surprise some people. I also had the Indiana Penn State game, which is also on November 8th, the same day as the Iowa-Oregon game. And then another sneaky game for me is the Michigan Northwestern game. Michigan has to go to the banks of Lake Michigan and play the Wildcats, who, as Vince knows, they put the nail in the coffin for James Franklin. So Northwestern, another sneaky solid team this year. I think that Minnesota Northwestern game is good. And I also think that the Wisconsin-Minnesota game is an underrated game, plus because it's a huge rivalry. And I think that's going to be the final game for Luke Fickell as the Wisconsin head coach. And I believe that will be the final game for PJ Fleck as the Minnesota head coach, because I believe that PJ Fleck will be a coach either in one of the bigger Big Ten schools, maybe Happy Valley, or down in the SEC. I think that someone's going to move in the SEC, and PJ is going to get that job.
Man, PJ's shtick will not go over in Happy Valley. Vince, how would the fan base react to the little squirrel coming with his little tie and his sweater?
Yeah, I don't think our fan base would be rowing the boats. But yeah, I think that USC at Nebraska game is something that needs to be brought up. That's something I had down on my note card here. Night game at Nebraska, very tough. They did have a very disappointing loss on the road at Minnesota, but the Big Ten Conference has been crazy this year. And then you got UCLA in there looking better. They didn't look great against Indiana, but outside of that game, they've looked pretty good since the coaching change. So they might be playing spoiler too.
The thing about UCLA, UCLA has one of the most physically gifted quarterbacks in the country. So if he's on, they can beat anybody if they can tackle. I mean, if they can tackle and Mayalava gets it going, they're fine. But yeah, to your point, it's a toss up for a lot of people.
Yeah, and when I talk, look at these teams in the college football playoff race, the only reason I think we're going to get less spots is not because the teams aren't as good, but because I can see so many other teams like winning out, and then maybe they lose in the conference championship game and only have one loss. Like Louisville's schedule is pretty easy. Miami, Georgia Tech, outside of the Georgia game, I could see them all being 11-1. The SEC schools, I think a lot of them might only have one loss at the end of the regular season. And, Houston only has one loss in the Big 12. BYU's undefeated. Texas Tech has one loss. Cincy has one loss. So, I think there's going to be a lot of 10-2 teams left out this year.
Before we close out, I do want to just note that Nebraska is soft. And if USC brings the right attitude and smacks their faces on the lines, they will win that game, because that's what Minnesota did. I mean, that's been the lesson every November. You hit October, November, and the softness of Nebraska rises to the fore. It doesn't matter who their freaking coach is. So, I'm not as worried about that as Joel is.
Wouldn't be a Big Ten podcast if we didn't have a little bit of smack talk on here as well. So, gentlemen, appreciate you coming on here. I will say one last thing, just to give Nebraska some credit. I am by no means a Nebraska fan, but just to give them some credit, if they do in fact beat USC this weekend, the rest of the schedule does line up similar to Michigan, with one game at the end of the year possibly to get them into the playoffs if they're able to win that one. And if they beat USC, they have at UCLA, at Penn State, and then Iowa. 2 tough road games going to UCLA with the way they've been playing. Obviously, the talent of Penn State, but the opportunity is still there for that to possibly happen. So
I'll definitely be rooting for the Huskers this weekend. Honestly,
yeah, no, I hear you. But yeah, we appreciate everybody being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Go check out Joel and Tori over at the 12 Saturdays podcast 2.0. Great Iowa content over there. And go check out Vince and his co-host Andrew over there at the Nittany Blues pod for all your Penn State stuff. Listen, you're going to need to stay informed on what's going on with Penn State right now, because it is just chaos. I mean, they could steal Brian Hartline. Who knows? They might go after PJ Fleck. Who knows at this point? We don't know what's going to happen, and it's going to be really interesting to find out.
My bet is Manny Diaz out of Duke.
I know they'll go after him hard. The other one that they should call is Brian Flores for the Minnesota Vikings, defensive coordinator. He would do real well in the Northeast as a recruiter.
I guess, Vince, I should ask you really fast before we get out of here. How do you feel about James Franklin possibly going to Virginia Tech? That seems to be the smoke.
One thing I do think is might make them pick somebody else is because Brent Pry, their former head coach, was our defensive coordinator, and maybe they don't want another Penn State guy.
Well, best was groomsman at James Franklin's wedding. Like, those two were in each other's weddings. They were best friends. They would go all the way back to Vanderbilt together. So I'm not sure James Franklin's going to jump at the chance to replace one of his best friends.
Yeah, but the one area I think that could hurt Penn State is recruiting, because Franklin gets a lot of good guys out of that Virginia DMV area. So that would definitely give Penn State a lot more competition on the recruiting front.
That's a good point. Good point. All right. B. Jones had to head out, but do go check out the USC Light the Torch podcast over there. They do great work as well. So thank you so much for listening and watching to the Big Ten Huddle around the Big Ten. We'll be back next week with more good content and everything. College football playoff rankings come out next week, and it's going to be a good time. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.